I talked about this this morning just a tad and kind of letting you guys know about tonight's message. But I'll start tonight's message off by asking the question, and I think I asked it this morning, have you ever had anything work out in your life so perfectly that you thought, only God could do that? Only God could do that. Anyone here have a moment like that? Hopefully most of you have at some level. I've had instances in my life when I thought something like that, and it was hard for me. I think one of the biggest ones, it was hard for me not to think like that when it came down to me becoming the pastor of the church. You've heard this many times, where I had my company listed for 2 years, probably 2 years, maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years. From the moment I became the assistant pastor here, I listed my company. And I wanted to sell it, and I wanted to dedicate all my time and my energy into ministry. And so for 4 years, nothing. Maybe I had a person or two. I had a couple of deals that I didn't really love. Like, I didn't really love how they were going to play out. They kept me connected at some level, and I didn't want to be connected at all. I wanted a complete clean break. I was not going to go into ministry and have one foot still in business. So that was not acceptable to me. And there was a couple of those deals where it was like 3 times more than what I would be getting another way. But I just did not want to be anywhere near connected to the business. So for me, it had to be the right situation. Well, in 2012, I graduated from seminary with my MDiv in May. Then in June, I sold the company. And I'll tell you in a second how I was able to sell the company. That part of the story you might not know a whole lot of. In May, I graduate. In June, I sell the company. In July, Pastor Thornton resigns after 20 years. He retires. Called it a resignation, but it was a retirement. And in August, the church called me to be the pastor. And I looked at it and I said, and I'm going to tell you, those were some stressful months. I don't know if, I don't have a job. I sold my job. I sold my company. And I could live off some of those savings, but am I going to move? Is the church even going to want me to be the pastor? Is Pastor Thornton going to resign even? I don't know what's going to happen. And it was stressful. It was really stressful. And once it happened, and by the way, it was a little over 12 years ago. It was 12 years ago on August 25th, I think. It might have been August 26th. So one of those 2 days. So it's been 12 years since I've been the pastor of this church. And I hope it's many, many, many more years. But you look back and I say, only God could have done it that way. Only God could have done it that way. How I sold the company was another one of those God things. So it's December of the year before, 2011, and we have this our main moving truck. All right, it was a 1997 International 4700. Okay, something like that, And this truck was our big dog. It held the biggest amount of furniture than any of the other trucks held. And we hired a new driver in December, and on his first day on the job, he drove it into an underpass and completely peeled the top of the truck off. And it was a disaster. And Brennan Weedy, who was in our church, he was actually in the truck. Fortunately, he wasn't in the bed of the truck, because if he was, who knows what would have happened. I mean, he could have been seriously injured or even killed. But that wasn't a fun day. That was not a fun day. I remember getting the truck towed and taking trucks out to the job. I'm thinking, why is this guy? I'm pretty sure I fired him on the spot. I think he got his own ride home. I think he was so embarrassed. I don't even think I was just like, yeah, this is your last day. And when I showed up, he was gone. It was your first day and it was your last day. I mean, the sign is pretty clear. You can't miss it in Lopatcong, New Jersey, that there's this little train, it's like 10 feet 6, and your trucks are all 12.6. You can't miss it. It's like a little thing. You cannot miss it. And he just roared right through it. and I thought, this is a complete disaster. It was like, I was so stressed, and I remember talking to Brennan and just being like, man, Brennan, never go into business. And I just needed to, I actually took the driver's place that day and did the job just to do something to get my mind off of it. I was so stressed out. It was like the worst thing that could happen in the business at that point. Well, a few months later, that truck's claim came in, and it sold. I mean, the claim money that came back was way, way more than I would ever have been able to sell that truck for. And it actually allowed me to reduce the price of the business so much that, because in my mind I figured, hey, it doesn't matter whether it comes in through a truck or whatever, to reduce the price of the business so much that it helped make the business sell almost immediately. So all these events, you look at all these events, it's like, man, this truck was a terrible, terrible thing, and yet it's like, man, you know what? I think God had his hand in that. I think, it's like this terrible thing turned out to be one of the things that ended up allowing me to leave the business, not even knowing if I'm going to be able to get into full-time ministry yet, because that was a thing. So I leave the business and I'm like, okay, I don't really have a job right now. I don't know what's going to happen. And all that stuff kind of orchestrated together allowed me to really be the pastor of this, because I couldn't have accepted the pastorate if I owned a company. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. Ethically, I wouldn't do that. And so, it all worked out. I look at it and say, man, it just, God's timing is all over that. And the things that gave me anxiety and the things that made me worry a little bit, or the things that had me like stressed or whatever, those were all things that God used in a contributing way to get me doing what he would have me do, like in ministry. So for me, I call that God's provision. I call that God's provision, not only in the sense of providing, but in the sense of timing, because provision could be timing as well, perfect timing. But God's perfect timing and God's perfect provision. There have been times I talk about on a Sunday service where, maybe you had a snow day. You've heard this before. I've talked about this before. Listen, I'm not one of those, I'm not a fatalist. Anyone who comes Wednesday night knows I'm not a fatalist. Anyone who listens to me knows I'm not a determinist or fatalist. But I'll have a whole series designed. I want to preach this day, this day. I know exactly what I'm going to preach all the way through. I mean, I don't know if you know this, you'll know now. I have all of my sermons prepared through February. I know exactly what I'm going to preach each day. And one thing, I get sick one day and the whole schedule, I've got to go and I've got to change a whole schedule. And I schedule this stuff around, like for instance, I got a sermon on the election, I've got a sermon on Christmas, I've got a couple different things. And there's a snow day and we have to miss. And a month later, someone showed up at one of the sermons, or maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, shows up at a Sunday, never met him before, basically decides to give their life to Christ because of what they heard that morning. And in my schedule, they're never hearing that. In my schedule, they're hearing maybe some boring message on Leviticus. I don't know what was, you know what I mean? By the way, what I think is boring, sometimes people love, and sometimes we are complete, I think, I bombed today. I got on base. I got hit by a pitch. It's better than nothing, but it wasn't a single or a double or a home run. And I'll have a wonderful response from the people. They were like, yeah, it was excellent. I was like, oh, okay, well, good. I'm glad to hear that. I wasn't really expecting that. And then the ones I'm thinking, was a home run, was a grand slam, not like crickets afterwards. Everyone walks out, completely avoids me, whatever. But, so this woman and this guy, they give their life to the Lord that day, or they at least claim to make some commitment to the Lord that day on the basis of what they hear. They would never have heard it based on my schedule. I look at that and I say, man, it's hard to see God's hand not on that. It's hard to look at that and not think, man, that was the timing of God. That was the provision of God. Well, something like that, because I didn't design it, God had his hands on it. You might even say designed it. Something like that happens in today's passage. The last thing that we saw was that Samaria, the capital city, was under siege and it had almost completely fallen. God miraculously stepped in and chased away the Syrian army, and Syria immediately, Samaria, the capital city, immediately has a thriving marketplace because of all the stuff, all the food and all the supplies. They were left behind, and so the people went out and they immediately had food. They immediately had a marketplace that was thriving. But what we're not really reading about so much, and what's presumed, what's really kind of mentioned in today's passage, is the long-term effects, depending on how you're reading the timing of this text, the long-term effects of a siege like what we read about. So think about the fact that the Syrians come in and they're taking city after city after city, and if we were to say, we were to pull it up on a map, these are the Syrians, and if we zoom in on Israel, they're taking all these cities until they surround the capital city. And it's like the last haven of Israelites. Well, the crops are like decimated. In an agricultural society, if your crops are decimated by the opposing army, that's not something that tomorrow is going to be such a great day for you. You may have had a reprieve in getting all this stuff from the camp of the army, but the land has to recover from the invasion. And so that's not going to be an easy time after that. There's going to be a recovery period, and it's not going to be, crops need time to regrow. The economy is going to need time to recover from the Biden administration, from the Syrian invasion. And the effects of that siege are far and wide. And it's affected people, good people, who are close to Elisha. Look at 2 Kings 8:1. Now Elisha spoke to the woman whose son he had restored to life. Anyone remember? This would be a Bible trivia for I would call it 1,000 if we didn't just look at this a few chapters ago. But I'm going to still call it a good 800. Anyone remember the name of the town that this woman is from? Oh man, that was quick. I think I put it too high. Shunem, yeah, Shunammite, yeah. So it wasn't 800, was it? Maybe 6. That's still 6. I think it's a solid 600. So the Shunammite, right? We remember. What do we remember about this woman? Before we read we remember that she was from Shunem, which is in the Jezreel Valley. That she was a prominent woman. What else do we remember about her? What did she do? Did she do anything for Elisha? Brittany. Yeah, they make a room for him to live in, right? And they provide for him and help him and take care of him. And she desperately wants something. What does she desperately want? We'll give another person a chance, a new person. Food. Well, she'll desperately want food soon enough. Not a bad answer. I desperately want food every Sunday night. What? I don't know. Eggs tonight, I think, right? I'll take it. I'll take it. What do we? Steak would be better. Steak would be better. Or sushi or something. But what does she desperately want? She wants a son. She wants a son. And Elisha prophesies that she would have one. Well, what happened to the son?
He got really sick.
And
almost died.
Let's cross one word out of there. He got very sick and almost, and that's what you want to go with? He died. Let's get rid of the almost part of that. He died, right? And of course, he's raised, right? We remember this account. It's been a few chapters. A lot's happened in those few chapters. A lot of time has gone for us as we've studied it. If you're reading it at home, it's like a day. This was like yesterday's reading. Now we're in today's reading. Anyway, Elisha spoke to the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, "Arise, go with your husband. Arise and go with your household, and sojourn wherever you can sojourn. For the Lord has called for a famine, and it will even come upon the land for 7 years." So Elisha has some history with this family. This is a family that has ministered to him and has ministered to his needs. I mean, we might say, I mean, he's basically stayed with them, almost like lived with them at times. Like this is like family to him. Now it seems to me, from the reading of the account, it seems to me that her husband has died, because he's interacting with her and not the husband. And later on, at the very least, we can see later on that her husband has died. There's no question about that at some point. But I'm going to presume at this point that the husband has died. And so Elisha sends her and her son away because the famine is coming, and it's going to be 7 years long. That's a long time. And he's called her to sojourn wherever you can. And that means sojourning is like to dwell temporarily, to live somewhere temporarily. That's not like I'm moving there to stay there. I'm moving there for now. The word can be defined as dwelling as an alien or a dependent. So she's going to basically, not like an alien from outer space, just so you understand. When I say alien, most of the time I'm talking about foreigners, okay? There's a political problem going on with foreigners right now, illegal aliens, but let's not talk about that. So we see a 7-year famine that's coming up. Does that remind you of any other 7-year famines in the Bible? Abby? Yeah, she's like immediately got him in, like the nervousness of getting called on so fast. Is that what happened? Like, I had water in my mouth. Oh, it was, I know the feeling. I got you. I read you. It's like Family Feud, you know. You hit the buzzer super quickly and then forget what you were going to say. 7 years is a long, long time. And it's extremely difficult to live in Israel during that type of a famine, because Israel, again, is an agricultural society, and it's not well watered. It's watered from the sky. So if you're not going to get rain, you're not going to get crops. And if there's not enough crops, then there's a famine. There's a shortage of food. And so Elisha tells her to leave the land, and that's a major faith decision. He's asking her to leave everything that she's known. That's not an easy thing to do. It kind of reminds me of, in a small way, of like the yearly situation with the hurricanes down in the South. You know, those people, the hurricane's coming, and they're being told to evacuate. They're being told to get out. And now they're going to leave everything they have, everything that they saved for and worked for in their lives, their homes, their property, their stuff for the most part. They're going to leave it there to the elements. And if they live anywhere near the shore, it's like, man, we don't know what's going to happen. And every once in a while, you'll see there was a storm that came up. It was over in the Panhandle a few years, and it went right through like this, almost like this town of like mobile homes, and just wiped out everything. I don't remember. Anyone remember what that town was right on the coast? What's that? No, it wasn't that. It was over by like Destin, Florida area, and it was by like the, I guess that would be like over by Tallahassee somewhere, I think, or like Panama City Beach or something like that. And the before after is like you see all these homes, and then the after is it's just like all just flat. Everything was decimated. You know, imagine like leaving everything that you have and not knowing what's going to come back. You know, that wouldn't necessarily be easy. Well, that's not exactly what's going on here. I mean, some people don't listen. Some people stay in their homes, and some people die in their homes. But anyway, this woman's being asked to leave, but not just for like a week, but for 7 years. And as far as we know, she's happy with where she lives, because when earlier in chapter 4, when Elisha's servant Gehazi, and we'll get a refresher on Gehazi in a minute, he says, hey, would you like for us to speak a word for you, on behalf of you, to the king? And she says, does anyone remember what she said? She's like, listen, I dwell among my own people. In other words, I'm happy where I'm at, where I am. And I don't really need anyone to speak to the king on my people. But I do need a son. Remember that? That's kind of what happened in chapter 4. Well, she's part of that community. And as far as we can tell, she's happy there. And now the prophet of the Lord is asking her to leave it all behind. That's not easy. That's not easy to do. What does she do? She acts in faith, and she obeys. In verse 2, so the woman arose and did according to the word of the man of God, and she went with her household and sojourned, that is, temporarily dwelt, in the land of the Philistines 7 years. So she does exactly what the prophet tells her to do. She knows that this is a prophet of the Lord. I mean, that's part of the reason why she ended up helping to build a house, having the house built on her property, the room built on her property. And she believes what he says. She believes that food will be unavailable, and she follows his word and leaves. She knows that Israel is not a place that can really support life well during a famine, that people will die, and that she perhaps might die. And so she goes to a place that can support life and food, and it's the coastal plains. So this is well watered. This is a well watered area. The problem is, it's also the land of the Philistines. You know, the Philistines are not good people. You know, even today, the people who live down there, you know, I'm sure there are wonderful citizens in there, but there are people in charge down there in Gaza today. Not good people. Not the type of people you want to have over for dinner. I mean, so when they're organizing people sending rockets into Israelite territories, and when they're organizing people invading, you know, parties and concerts and murdering 1,200 Israelites, and you know, these are not good. They don't believe in Israel's right to exist as a nation. Well, you know, a lot of that really did exist even in that day. So if you're an Israelite and you're going to a place that is kind of hostile to Israel, that's not really a good place to be. The land of the Philistines is not a great place to be, but she could survive there. Now, she's not the only biblical character that traveled down there to avoid a famine. Can anyone name another biblical character that traveled to the land of the Philistines or thereabouts to survive a famine? Anyone at all? Go ahead. No, I was just, go for it. What'd you have? Well, let me press pause on that one. Not the land of the Philistines, but very similar circumstance. We're coming to that. Anyone know of any patriarchs? What's that? We're going back to Abby. Go ahead.
Sorry for oohing. Moses. No, Moses. No.
Ben.
I would say it's Isaac, but it's because
I said
Isaac is one of the two. Yes! Eventually, if you name enough names, you're going to get to Abraham. So, you know, okay, that's good. This is good. We're getting it. Sometimes it's tough when you're put on the spot to, figure. My brain is slow. So even with Brother Joe, you'll ask a question from time to time, and it takes me a few seconds. Like sometimes the people will get some of those things before me because my brain is slow. Some people. Some people think like I can immediately spit off all these things. My brain is slow. All right, it takes me a while for something to come in. It tends to sink in once it comes in, but I am actually a little slow at times. Well, anyway, she travels 30 miles from Samaria from Samaria, the capital city, to the land of the Philistines, and she might go as far as Gaza, which would be like another 40 miles away. That would take days. That would take days to get there, and she would have to bring some stuff with her. It would take days to get there. But eventually she would find her new temporary home somewhere in the land of the Philistines, which again is not a comfortable place for an Israelite to live. This is the land of Baal. This is the land of, you might remember another Philistine god from the book of Judges. Who said that? Dagon, whose hands and feet were cut off, I think, as he fell over before I think his head too, as he fell, his idol fell over before the Ark of the Covenant. It was taken by the Philistines. This is a land of idolatry, and now this is her new home. And so for 7 years she lives among these idolaters. But I would imagine that she's thankful. Even though it's not a great situation, she's thankful that she can survive. And with each passing year, more thankful that she can survive. Thankful that the Lord has provided for her. But we can easily presume that she misses her home. The passage certainly will imply that she longs for her home in Israel, in the Jezreel Valley, that her heart most likely remains in Shunem with her people. And so when the famine ends, she goes back home. But the problem is her land is no longer hers. She's been gone 7 years. So it's like, was it Bilbo Baggins or was it Frodo? Which one was it whose land they thought he was gone and they took his land? It was Frodo. Long live Frodo. Frodo lives. You know, Frodo Baggins, who left Bag End in The Lord of the Rings, which was a much better book than movie, by the way, a considerably better book than a movie. The movie is not even close to the book. But anyway, Frodo Baggins, who leaves, he's gone for I don't know how many years, and when he gets back, weren't they auctioning his stuff off? Is that in the movie? That's fact. That's lore. You know, so in the book, you know, he comes back. Anyone read the book? Anyone? We have a couple of. You know, when he comes back, they're auctioning off his stuff because they thought he was. I think they thought he was dead, right? They thought he was dead, but he wasn't dead. Well, if you just went up and went missing for years, they would take your stuff. Well, that's kind of what happens here. The king seizes the property when it's vacant for 7 years at some point in there. And so she needs to appeal to the king for her property. Look at verse 3. At the end of 7 years, the woman returned from the land of the Philistines to Bag End. No. To, what was it? Was that what it's called? Bag End? And that was in the land of the Shire. That was in the Shire. She returned to the Shire, for your Lord of the Ring fans. At the end of 7 years, the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, and she went out to appeal to the king for her house and her field. Now, listen, if her husband were alive, he would be appealing to the king. So he's gone, he's dead. Whether he was dead or not at the time they left, I can't say for sure. I think he was dead. But he's dead now, or he's gone at some level. He's left he's not there. And so she needs to do it. And that reminds me, Abby, that reminds me of the book of Ruth. That reminds me of the book of Ruth. That's where we're coming to the book of Ruth. So Naomi had left her land with her husband, Elimelech, and her 2 sons, and went to dwell in the land of in the fields of Moab. That's what it says in the Hebrew, in the fields of Moab. And of course, you know, one of her daughters-in-law, because the sons died, one of the daughters-in-law, whose name was Ruth, says, your God is my God, you know, your God will be my God, and your people my people. And she goes back to the land, and of course we have that, they went back, and they needed to be redeemed. They needed to be redeemed. They needed to be restored as a people. Well, something like that, their property needed to be redeemed. And anyone remember the name of the guy who redeemed the property? This is like Bible trivia for 200. The hands were going up. Who said Boaz? Man, we had hands up. We had a really anxious hand back there too. Very anxious hand back there today. Really wanting that, He's like, I know it, I got it. One of those things. You're ruining it, man. You're ruining it. So Boaz goes back and he redeems Ruth and Naomi and their property. And so this woman, she travels back to her homeland and she travels to the capital city, Samaria. And when she appears before the king's guards, she asks for an appointment with the king, presumably. And while all this is going on, she went to appeal to the king for her house and for her field. While all this is going on, we get this whole story about the woman from Shunem and her going away and her coming back and appealing for her land, which had been seized by the throne. We have something else going on at that moment. At that exact moment, we leave that scene and we enter into the royal palace of Samaria, into a conversation. God allows us to enter into an intimate conversation between the king and somebody, which we'll see, well, I guess we're going to see right now, Gehazi. Now, the king was talking with Gehazi. Anyone remember anything about Gehazi? Oh, let's just go with one or two things for now. Greedy and got some stuff, right? I'll take that, greedy and got some stuff. Anyone remember any of the stuff in generalities? Okay, well, we got that too. Well, let's just hold on, press pause for that. What type of stuff did he get with a greedy? Is that what you meant? The stuff he got, right? Yeah.
You get like 2 pairs of clothes and then like 2 talents of silver.
He got clothes and money. And then he got some other stuff, which was leprosy, right? He got leprosy. I guess that's an easy way to sum up what happened. Gehazi, we think of Gehazi as a good dude or a bad dude? Not very favorably, right? Well, anyway, sorry. Now, the king was talking with Gehazi, the servant of the... Because this is how my mind reads the Bible. So the king's talking with Gehazi. I stop for a second, Gehazi. Let me go through and think through what's going on with Gehazi, refresh my memory with Gehazi. That's just how I work when I read the Bible. Now, the king was talking with Gehazi, and I'm slow. The king was talking with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, please, relate to me all the great things that Elisha has done. Tell me some of the great things that Elisha has done. Now, Gehazi, you look at him and say, how is Gehazi there? Doesn't he have leprosy right now? Maybe he's at a distance. Maybe there's a remission or something that's going on. We don't know all the answers there. But we know that he's there, and we know that he's talking to the king, and we know that he used to be the servant of Elisha, and so he's got stories to tell the king. And at that very moment, the king wants to hear stories about Elisha. And if he says, hey, listen, tell me some of the great things about Elisha. And if you're Gehazi and you had to come up with one great thing that Elisha had done, what's the greatest thing that you could possibly think of that Elisha had done? I was thinking about the axe head. But yeah, that's good too. Raising the dead. Yeah. So raising the dead. Let's go with that. That's what she's going to go to, right? She's going to talk about how Elisha raised the dead. He raised the Shunammite woman's son from the dead. That would be the most prominent. The axe head would be cool, but it's not raising someone from the dead. And so that's exactly what Gehazi is telling the king. As the woman, as the boy's mother is outside the palace waiting to talk to the king, at that very moment when she's outside waiting to appeal to the king for the property, at that exact moment is when the king is asking Elisha's servant, former servant, to tell them, and Elisha's servant is telling the king about that very woman who's outside. And as far as we can tell, they have no clue she's out there. Look at verse 5. Talk about the timing of God. Talk about the providence of God. Look at verses 5. We'll just look at verse 5 for now. As he was relating to the king how he had restored to life the one who was dead, so right in the middle of the conversation, the woman whose son he had restored to life appealed to the king for her house and her... But she shows up. Speak of the devil, one of those moments, right? And Gehazi said, "My lord, O king, this is the woman. And this is her son whom Elisha restored to life. These are the very people I was just telling you about." This is no coincidence. God knows exactly what he's doing. This is what we would call a divine appointment. She hasn't been there in 7 years. In 7 years, she's been outside of the land of Israel. And at the exact time she comes back, Gehazi is having a conversation with the king about what happened with her and her son. And she shows up. It was like something interesting happened, like one millionth of that yesterday at the Penn State game. There's 100-some thousand people there, somewhere between 103,000 and 108,000 people. That's the largest accumulation of people I've ever been involved in. And I'm walking to my row, and I get to my seat. I'm going up the seat, and I hear, "Pastor Leap!" And I look to the side, and there's Pietro Macaron. In the same section, 15 feet away from me, 15 rows, which those rows, it's like 15 real feet, maybe 20 feet away, 25 feet away, is Pietro Macaron. What are the chances that of 100,000 people, he's sitting right there by me? And I didn't know he was going. He didn't know I was going. And he's like, "Man, these were really, this is a fantastic price. $20 for these seats, you can't beat it." I'm like, "Man, I wish I paid $20 for those seats. I bought them months ago." But anyway, it was like, wow, what are the chances, right? So, he's really happy, gives me a big hug, that type of stuff. Well, here, times a million, this woman comes back to the land of Israel, and she's there, and they're talking about her. And you might remember what Gehazi initially offered her. He said, "Would you have a word spoken to the king on your behalf?" And she said, "No, I dwell amongst my own people." Well, now, the word is being spoken on her behalf without her even being known it. And while she needs it. Talk about the providence of God. Does God care for this woman? Does God care for her welfare? And so God restores her land through this act, through the king. When the king asked the woman, she related it to him. She's like, "Yeah, this is what happened." So the king appointed for her a certain officer, saying, "Restore all that was hers and all the produce of the field from the day that she left even until now." Her land goes back to her. All the crops that we were able to grow from her property, we're going to take the money from that and we're going to reimburse it to her. She's going to get back all of it. She's going to be completely restored. In other words, she was the rightful owner all along. We tilled the land for her. Everything we grew was rightfully hers. And the king returns all that was hers and all the produce. In arrears, can we use that term, in arrears? Retrospectively, I don't know, all the stuff going back all the way to now. Now, why would God do such great things and go to such great lengths for this woman? And you think about the history of this woman. I mean, God's done some pretty awesome stuff. Gave her a son, first off, raised him from the dead, saved her during famine, and now restores everything after she had been gone. It's like, why would God do this for her? Well, first, the obvious answer is that he cares for her. Right? He cares for her. And by the way, he cares for you. And so you might look at, you might be the guy, as I once was, you might be the guy that would think, I don't want to go on that plane because if I go, it's going down. That's how I used to feel. God's going to get me on that plane. I deserve to be gotten. And I do deserve to be gotten. I mean, we all deserve to be gotten, really. I'm going to go on that plane and I'm going to be the reason it goes down. And I've changed my thinking about that to the point where it's like, I'm going to go on that plane and I might be the reason it doesn't go down. because God loves me, and God may choose to protect all of us because he loves us who are on the planet. I've just changed my thinking on it because I see the provision of God for his people over, not because I'm something great. I mean, I'm nothing, but just because of God's love for us. So it's obvious God loves this woman. I mean, look at the great things. That shows his love for her. Well, I think there's a nugget in there that's to be seen, that was clearly mentioned, that we've already talked about, that's a factor here. And that is that she took care of Elisha. She took care of God's prophet. She provided a place to stay for him. She blessed him in his time of need. And now God is blessing her in her time of need. I look after and I say, man, God really may choose and often does bless those who bless his own. And I believe that this is something about the character of God that shows us a timeless element, that this is something that God still does today, that God still blesses people who bless his people. Now, it may not be the exact same way. It may not look anything like what we saw in this passage, but the principle remains that God still provides for his own. He still does, and he still blesses those who bless his own. Every once in a while we get a glimpse at it. I saw it when I became the pastor of this church. I don't believe that was a coincidence. I look at all those events, some that were like stomach-turning events, and look at it, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I can't look at it and say, man, I got lucky. I might use the term I lucked out, or what. It's like, no, God had his hands all over that. And sometimes it's big things, and sometimes it's little things. I thought like probably the smallest thing that I think of, and I'm sure there were smaller things, and I'm sure there were bigger things. There's all types of things. But like the smallest things, that gift card I got in seminary right after I had to give a 25. I really wanted to go out with my wife for dinner, and I had a $25 gift card, and I gave it away for babysitting, for a church thing. And I gave it away like, man, I really don't want to give away, but I have to give these people this. I have to. I can't have them watch. I just can't do it. And they watched Isabella. I think that was all we had at the time. And I gave it away, and it hurt my heart to give it away, but I had to give it to him. And then that was like Friday night or Saturday night, and then Monday morning was in a $25 Walmart gift card. I don't think we used it to go out to eat. I think we put it towards groceries at the time. I don't remember what happened, but it was like, wow, and it was so little. It was so nothing. But it's just like there's big things and there's little things, and you could look at how God provides in all these different ways, and how his perfect timing just works in ways that you just couldn't design by yourself. Like nobody knew there was nobody that knew what we were doing. There was nobody knew that we were not wanting to, it was painful to my heart to give away the tiny, it was a tiny little gift card. Most of you wouldn't think, especially in today's economy. So I guess that would be like a $50 gift card today in Biden's economy. I don't know. Doesn't go the same. But it was a little thing at the time, and it seemed like such a big thing. And it was just a glimpse of how God provides. And we've had so many glimpses of how God provides. And I could give you story after story after story of how God has provided if I'm looking at my life from the perspective of the Shunammite woman. And that's what he did in this passage. He provided for her, and he still provides today. God provides for his people. And so we need to trust in him and in his Son to provide for all of our needs. Let's take our hymnals and turn to 637. We'll just sing, what's the song? It's just a verse.